Hello and welcome. So in this video we're just going to be working with nested loop. So I'm just going to assume that you have an understanding of what a basic loop is, and we're just going to see what happens when we apply a nested loop. By definition, a nested loop is just a loop inside a loop. Given these two lists, they have the same length. I just want to add the entries of A with the entries of B. So we just want to see when we just add those, what's going to happen in the result. So to do that, I'm just going to create, let me just create an empty list where I'm going to store the resulted strings being added. And I'm just going to do an outer loop. So for I in A, I in this case will just be a replica of the entries in A. And then I'm going to nest it and say for J in B, and in this case B is going to be, J is going to be the replica of the values inside B. And I just want to add, in this case, file.append I plus J. If you think logic, you would expect the result to be just you learning Python, you not understanding nested loop. But let's just check if that will be the case when we print our result. So print val, and this is basically what we get. You were expecting maybe a length of 2, but in this case we're getting a length of 4. Okay, and the way that we can interpret is, you can see there's some kind of a repetition here. You are learning, and when that is done, you have you're not understanding. So what happens is the execution of this will depend on the length of your inner loop. So in this case, it will depend on the length of your B. It's going to start with you learning, and then it's going to go to B. At that B, you're learning Python. When it's done, it doesn't jump to the next entry of A, but rather jump to the next entry of B and say you're learning nested loop. So that's why you see that you have you're learning. And when it's done with these two, the next entry now of A will go to B and say you're not understanding Python, and then again you're not understanding nested loop. So this is nothing more than just a repetition, a loop inside a loop. And we're going to look at an example that demonstrates such. So you can see here you have a loop inside a loop. So this is your inner loop, this is your outer loop, and we're going to see how we can apply this nested loop to solve this question. Another application that you could use for nested loop sometimes, let's say you have a list of a list and you want to unpack that list to be just one list. You can also go inside a loop in that way using nested. Okay, so now let's just try to solve this double summation. So you can see that I've listed two approaches that you can use here. It's a nested loop. The other one is just the separation of each sigma using function, but that's not what we'll be doing now. We'll just stick to nested, and we're not going to solve it in terms of a function either. So we start by coding. We start from the outer loop and then go to the nested or the inner loop. So now we're just going to say for, and then you can see that we start at k equals 1. So the loop is going to be in terms of k. So for k in range, and where do we start? You can see that k starts from 1 there. Where do we end? At s plus 1, and it's a terms, so we're going to skip by 1, that's for sure. So this will just be the outer loop. Now we go to the inner loop. Simple. It's already telling us that it's going to be 4, and in range, where do we start? N start from 1 as well. What does it end? End at k. So we can say plus 1 there as well. so that it's included, and we skip with 1 as well. And that's just about it. So now there's something that I don't want to put this inside a list and use some kind of summation. I'm just going to create some kind of a dummy value that I'm going to start. That's going to be equal to 0. So that's what will help us to keep adding. And then now I'm just going to write the equation and I'm going to call it term. And then this term will simply, or maybe I can say terms, is going to be equal to n squared. So now we just want to keep adding this term. And how do we do that? We can just do this equal to terms. So these just help us to keep adding these terms. Start from 0 plus term. In this case, it will be term 1. And then from there, it will keep on continuing for as long as the loop is running. And now that we have this, we can simply just, okay, I feel like it would have been easy to actually do it as a function in this case. But we can just go here and just think, okay, I want to get how many terms do we have here? 1, 2, 3. So we can basically just put 4 there. And in this case, this k will always depend on what we have there. It's fine. And then we can try to print now what our sum will be. So that gave us our summation, or our double summation for this question. And if maybe we wanted to see these values, we could have introduced an empty list and say, okay, now instead, okay, we can say val dot append terms. Okay, I also want to print val. So yeah, it's too much coding since we didn't use a function. Okay, no, this we're printing val, and let's see. So now we can see how these are behaving. Obviously, you can't see it as square because it's already been simplified by the Python calculator. But in this case, you can see that the first term there is 1 squared. That's why you get 1. And then second, it's 1 squared plus 2. So it keeps repeating. If you remember how this was executed, it always starts. As long as we're in a new term, it executes from the beginning of the inner loop. So that's what's happening here. You have 1, again, 1 appears, and then 2 squared. That's why you have 4. And then it goes to the next term. It starts again from the inner loop, which is 1, as you can see there, and then 4, and then 9, and it continues like that. And then you can see that if you add these terms, you're going to get 20. So if you wanted to do that, you could have just said maybe sum val. So these are the two methods that you could have used to solve this if you don't want to use the dummy variable. So it's quite easy when you're using a function because you don't need to define for or term. You can simply specify it. So it's easy for you to change for many terms if you wanna check. You can see here if we wanted to check for 5, we have to go check. I mean, wanted to check for 4, we need to put 5 there. That's just not good practice. So if it's a function, you can easily change those values in your print statement. Okay, so that's just about it in terms of your nested loop. And then I will do another one where I will just break it down using a function.